The white colonial-style house standing in the suburbs of Rochester, New York, embodied the very essence of the American dream. The well-maintained front yard was beautifully landscaped with seasonal flowers planted with care, so stunning that it drew envious glances from neighbors. In this house, Natalie Wilson lived quietly with her husband Paul. Natalie worked part-time as a librarian at the local public library. With her modest and gentle nature, she was beloved by both patrons and colleagues. The storytime sessions with children were her happiest moments. Though married for 15 years, the couple had no children. They had struggled with infertility from early in their marriage and tried various treatments, but had given up 5 years ago. Since then, they had told each other that a life together as just the two of us isn't so bad, and had supported each other through the years. Her husband Paul worked in the sales department at American Security, a major insurance company. With his natural charm and skillful conversation, he consistently maintained top sales performance. Colleagues called him Charming Paul, and he enjoyed deep trust from clients. He had been the quarterback on his high school football team and still maintained his athletic physique from those days. His blonde hair, blue eyes, and captivating smile never failed to capture the hearts of many women. The most reliable person in Natalie's life was her brother James. He led busy days as the chief of internal medicine at Rochester General Hospital. Having graduated medical school at the top of his class and been recognized as promising since his residency days, he was a brilliant physician who had become department chief at a young age. Though married with 2 children, he constantly worried about not having enough time for his family due to his demanding work schedule. The relationship between brother and sister was special. Having lost their parents early, James had been like a father figure to Natalie. When she was struggling with college decisions, when she decided to marry, and when she gave up fertility treatments, James had always provided sound advice. However, for about a year now, he had been assigned as project manager for the hospital's new wing construction and had become even busier than before. As a result, opportunities for the siblings to see each other had drastically decreased. 6 months ago, Natalie began suffering from unexplained health problems. Getting up in the morning became difficult, and she was constantly plagued by dizziness and nausea. Chronic fatigue worsened day by day, and she could no longer concentrate even on reading, which she had loved. At work, colleagues worried, asking, "You look pale lately, are you okay?" Paul supported Natalie devotedly through this difficult time. "It must be menopause symptoms. From what I've researched, it's not unusual for someone your age," he would gently comfort her, continuously purchasing supplements and herbal medicines that were supposed to be good for her health. He always prepared a special health tea blend just for you for breakfast and cooked dinners using ingredients that were easy to digest. "Your health is the most important thing, so don't worry about work," Paul would say, gently taking Natalie's hand. "If necessary, I'll find the best doctors. I'll do anything to help you get better." Natalie was moved to tears by her husband's loving words. 15 years into their marriage, she felt Paul's affection remained unchanged toward her. As if to fill the loneliness of not having children, the two loved each other deeply. At least, that's what Natalie believed. Not wanting to worry her busy brother, Natalie hadn't told him much about her health problems. In their few brief phone calls each year, she would only report that she was doing fine. James sometimes sensed fatigue in his sister's voice, but knowing that Paul was taking devoted care of her, he felt reassured. However, Natalie's condition showed no improvement and, if anything, continued to deteriorate. On an October morning, a pleasant autumn breeze was blowing through Rochester. The maple leaves were beginning to change color, and Natalie woke up feeling refreshed for the first time in a long while. However, this peaceful feeling didn't last long. "Good morning, honey. I've prepared a special breakfast for you today," Paul's voice called from the kitchen. He was wearing an apron and smiling as usual. "Considering your condition, I used only organic ingredients." On the dining table sat freshly baked toast and scrambled eggs, along with a cup containing an unfamiliar brown liquid. "This is a new health tea. I researched it online and ordered it specially. An expert in Eastern medicine recommended it as effective for menopausal symptoms. Natalie took a sip of the tea. Bitterness and a distinctive herbal aroma spread through her mouth. It's a bit bitter, but if it's good for me, she smiled and drank it all. After finishing breakfast, the usual dizziness and mild nausea began, as always. Feeling sick again. Paul worriedly placed his hand on her forehead. You don't seem to have a fever, but maybe you should stay home from the library today. I'm fine. The children are looking forward to my story time. Natalie tried to stand up, but her legs felt unsteady. Paul immediately supported her. Don't push yourself. But if you care that much about the children, I'll support you. Just promise me you'll come home immediately if you feel even a little worse. During her commute to the library, Natalie noticed it was becoming difficult to concentrate on driving. Traffic lights appeared blurry, and she couldn't grip the steering wheel firmly. She somehow managed to arrive at the library, where her colleague Margaret rushed over to her. Natalie, are you okay? You look completely pale, Margaret said. She had been working with Natalie for years and was her close friend. I've been worried about how unwell you've seemed lately. I'm just a little tired. Don't worry, Natalie forced a smile, but Margaret's expression remained clouded with concern. She managed to get through the morning tasks, but by lunchtime, her symptoms had worsened considerably. When it was time for children's story hour, Natalie was struck by severe dizziness while holding an open picture book. Mrs. Wilson, what's wrong? A 7-year-old girl looked up at her with concern. I just need to rest for a moment, Natalie said, leaning back in her chair. The room seemed to spin around her, and she felt as if the contents of her stomach might come up. Margaret and other staff members rushed over in alarm. We should take you to the hospital right away. Shouldn't we call an ambulance? I'm fine, I'll call my husband, Natalie said, taking out her smartphone with trembling hands. Paul answered immediately. What's wrong? I'm feeling sick at the library, could you come pick me up? I'll be right there. Rest until then. I love you, Natalie. 30 minutes later, Paul appeared at the library. His face showed deep concern. You shouldn't have pushed yourself this hard. I should have been watching you more carefully. Mr. Wilson, your wife's condition seems to have worsened considerably over the past few months, Margaret said to Paul. Don't you think she should see a specialist? Actually, I've been thinking the same thing. I'll look for the best doctor, maybe as early as tomorrow, Paul answered with a serious expression. In the car on the way home, Natalie leaned her head against the window. Paul, am I really going through menopause? Are such severe symptoms normal? There are individual differences, so it's hard to say definitively. But if you're worried, maybe we should consult your brother this weekend, Paul gently suggested. But James is so busy. He's family, so you don't need to hold back. Your health is the most important thing. That evening, Paul prepared a special dinner for her. I made medicinal cuisine that I researched online just for you. It's a tonic soup with medicinal herbs and steamed vegetables that are easy to digest. The table was set with beautifully presented dishes. The soup was a deep brown color with a distinctive aroma like herbal medicine. This looks like such an elaborate meal. Thank you. I'd do anything for you. I want you to get better as soon as possible, Paul gazed at Natalie with loving eyes. About 15 minutes after they began eating, Natalie was struck by the most intense abdominal pain she had ever experienced. Pain like her internal organs were being torn apart came in waves. Ugh! Natalie dropped her utensils and collapsed onto the table. Natalie! What's wrong? Paul jumped up in alarm. My stomach hurts. I've never felt anything like this. Natalie couldn't continue speaking. Cold sweat beaded on her forehead, and her face turned ashen. I'll call an ambulance right away, Paul said, taking out his cell phone. At that moment, Natalie rushed to the bathroom. Clinging to the toilet, Natalie was seized by violent vomiting. At first it was the contents of dinner, but soon it became yellow liquid like bile, and finally vomit mixed with bright red blood. Blood. Natalie felt as if her own voice was coming from far away. Her vision blurred and consciousness began to fade. With her cheek against the cold bathroom tiles, she lost consciousness. Natalie! Natalie! Paul's screams echoed. He checked his wife's pulse and waited for the paramedics to arrive. "Hold on, I love you, you're going to be absolutely fine." The ambulance siren wailed through the quiet residential neighborhood. The paramedics quickly administered treatment and loaded Natalie onto a stretcher. Paul rode in the ambulance, continuously holding his wife's hand. "What symptoms has your wife been experiencing?" a paramedic asked. "For about 6 months, she's been suffering from dizziness, nausea, and chronic fatigue. We thought it was menopausal symptoms." Paul's voice was shaking. "What did she have for dinner tonight?" "Medicinal soup and steamed vegetables. I made them thinking they would be good for her health." The ambulance headed toward Rochester General Hospital. Natalie was fitted with an oxygen mask and receiving 4 fluids, but she remained unconscious. Paul continued praying to God for his wife's recovery. The emergency department at Rochester General Hospital was bustling with activity despite the late hour. White fluorescent lights cast a pale glow on the faces of patients being brought in on stretchers. Among them, internal medicine chief James Thompson was working as the attending physician on duty. "Emergency patient," a nurse's voice rang out. The moment James turned around and saw the face of the woman lying on the stretcher, the blood drained from his face. "Natalie." His voice trembled. "Why, how did she get in this condition?" Seeing his sister's pale face, closed eyelids, and thin arms connected to 4 tubes, James struggled desperately to maintain his composure as a physician. In his 15 years as a doctor, he had never been this shaken. "Doctor, do you know this patient?" a young resident asked. "She's my sister," James answered briefly, then immediately switched to professional mode. "Give me the details of her symptoms." While the paramedics explained the situation, Paul came running over. "Please help her. My wife has been having health problems for 6 months, and tonight this suddenly happened." James glanced at Paul, but treating his sister was the top priority right now. "Get blood work, CT scan, and prepare for endoscopy immediately. Add toxicology screening too." "Toxicology screening?" the resident asked in surprise. "The symptoms suggest food poisoning or drug reaction. We need to investigate thoroughly." James's voice was stern. Natalie was taken to the intensive care unit, where various tests were performed one after another. James carefully reviewed each test result. Blood pressure was abnormally low, and liver function values were far outside the normal range. "Doctor, the blood test results are in," a technician brought the report. The moment James looked at the report, his expression froze. The papers in his hand began to tremble slightly. "Are you certain about this?" "Yes, we tested twice and got the same results." The report listed the name of a substance detected in her blood. It was an organophosphorus compound found in pesticides. Moreover, the concentration was so high that it couldn't be explained by a single ingestion, indicating long-term accumulation. "Why didn't she come in sooner?" James inadvertently raised his voice. As nurses turned to look, he clutched the report. "With this level of accumulation, symptoms should have appeared months ago." The CT scan results were equally shocking. There was widespread inflammation of the stomach lining, and signs of liver damage were visible. These findings were completely consistent with chronic toxic substance ingestion. James headed to the waiting room where Paul was. "Paul, I need to talk to you. I want to explain Natalie's condition." "Of course. Will my wife be all right?" Paul's face showed deep concern. I'll do anything I can to help. First, abnormal substances have been detected in Natalie's blood. James chose his words carefully. Detailed testing is needed, but there's a possibility that something was mixed into her food or drink. Food. But we only use normal ingredients. Paul showed a confused expression. If anything, I've been ordering health foods and supplements for my wife's condition. What kind of health foods? Herbal medicines and medicinal teas, plus supplements based on Eastern medicine. I carefully selected everything online, choosing items with good reviews. James nodded, but in his mind he was considering another possibility. The detected substance was not something that would be mixed into health foods. This was clearly something that had been intentionally administered. Paul, I'm sorry, but I'd like to speak with Natalie alone for a moment. As family, I want to confirm the detailed situation. Of course. I'll wait outside. After Paul left the room, James quickly closed the door. Natalie had regained consciousness but was still in a very weak state. James. Natalie looked at her brother's face with relief. Why am I here? Listen to me, Natalie. What I'm about to tell you may be hard to believe, but it concerns your life. James sat beside his sister's bed. Pesticide components were detected in your blood. Pesticides. Natalie was confused. But how could such things? Moreover, the concentration indicates levels that could only be reached through long-term ingestion. At least 6 months, possibly longer, of continuous administration. Natalie's face went pale. Continuous. But who would? Why? James took his sister's hand. It was ice cold. Try to remember what you eat and drink every day. Especially anything new you started around 6 months ago when you began feeling unwell. Paul. Paul makes me health tea every morning. Natalie's voice began to shake. And he specially prepares dinner for me, but surely. I'm calling the police immediately. James stood up. And you need to leave that house today. Your life is in danger. But James, the idea that Paul would try to kill me, that's impossible. He loves me. For 15 years, always. James placed his hand on his sister's shoulder. This isn't an accident. It's systematic poisoning. The pattern of symptom progression, the type of poison used, and the duration of administration, everything points to attempted murder. Natalie stared at her brother with disbelief. But why? Why would Paul want to? That's for the police to investigate. Right now, your safety is the top priority. James reached for the phone in the room. As a doctor and as your brother, I have a duty to protect you. At that moment, there was a knock on the door. Excuse me, came Paul's voice. James and Natalie looked at each other. Fear flickered in Natalie's eyes. Accepting the reality that the husband she had trusted for 15 years had actually been trying to kill her was too painful and too frightening. Please come in, James answered, trying to remain calm. However, in his heart, his determination to do anything to protect his sister was solidifying. The moment Paul entered the room, James maintained his composure as a physician while tensing every muscle in his body. The sense of mission to protect his sister burned in his chest. Natalie, how are you feeling? Paul approached the bedside with a loving voice, but James subtly positioned himself in front of him. Paul, I need to explain the test results in detail. Let's talk outside. James's voice was outwardly calm but had a cold undertone. But I'm worried about my wife's condition. As a physician, I'll explain everything responsibly. Natalie needs rest. A subtle tension flowed between the three of them. Natalie looked back and forth between her brother and husband, sensing that her life was about to change dramatically. In a small consultation room for medical staff, James placed the test report on the table. Paul, abnormal substances were detected in Natalie's blood work. Organophosphorus compounds, specifically components found in pesticides. Paul's expression stiffened for a moment, but quickly returned to one of confusion. Pesticides. But how could such things? What's more problematic is the concentration, James continued calmly. It can't be explained by a single accidental ingestion. Judging by the accumulation levels in her blood, she's been ingesting this continuously for at least 6 months. Continuously. Paul repeated in a trembling voice. But how is such a thing possible? It's possible. Small amounts mixed into daily meals and drinks, James's eyes fixed sharply on Paul. I want to hear more details about the health tea you prepare for Natalie every morning, and about her dinners. Paul was sweating on his forehead. The health tea uses herbs I purchased online, to ease my wife's menopausal symptoms. Where are those herbs now? They're stored in our kitchen at home. They'll need to be submitted to the police. The moment James said this, Paul's face turned ashen. Police? Why police? Surely you don't think she was intentionally poisoned? That possibility is high. James stood up. The pattern of stomach and liver damage completely matches symptoms from chronic toxic substance ingestion. This is medical fact. At that moment, there was a knock on the consultation room door. Excuse me. We're detectives from Rochester Police. 2 detectives entered. James had contacted them in advance. You're Paul Wilson, correct? The older detective took out his notebook. We'd like to speak with you about your wife's case. Paul stood up in panic. What do you mean? Do you seriously believe my wife was poisoned? First, we'd like to search your kitchen at home. The younger detective showed a warrant. Also, we have some questions about your wife's life insurance. Life insurance? Paul's voice cracked. It was increased a year ago, wasn't it? You're the beneficiary. James was shocked. He had never heard about his sister's life insurance before. Actually, I recommended it to my wife. Paul couldn't hide his agitation. Thinking about the future, we both increased our insurance coverage. Then what's your insurance amount? The detective asked. Paul couldn't answer. Sweat dripped from his forehead down his cheeks. Why did you increase only your wife's coverage? That was. 2 hours later, decisive evidence was discovered in Paul's kitchen. A detective reported to James by phone. Pesticide components were detected in containers stored with the herbs. Also, we found records showing he purchased this pesticide online 3 months ago. There was an even more shocking discovery. Large quantities of intimate photos with a woman in her late 20s were found on Paul's cell phone. Message history showed the two had been in an affair for over a year and had even made plans to marry after Natalie's death. The lover's name is Jessica Lee, a 28-year-old nail technician, the detective reported. The two had already contracted for a new residence and were preparing to start a new life together with Natalie's insurance money. When brought back to the consultation room, Paul no longer had the will to make excuses. However, he tried to maintain his act until the end. I love Natalie. I would never do anything to hurt my wife. Then how do you explain this? The detective showed Paul his cell phone screen. It displayed photos with his lover and a message reading, "I'll be free soon. Once the insurance money comes in, I'll start a new life with you." Paul collapsed into his chair. I felt true love with Jessica. My marriage to Natalie. I couldn't feel love anymore. So you tried to kill your wife. I didn't intend to kill her. I just thought, if she got sick and naturally. Paul's voice trembled. James clenched his fists in anger. Naturally. Poisoning her for over 6 months, and you call that natural? I just wanted to be happy with my lover. I didn't want to cause Natalie pain. That's why I used small amounts. Put the handcuffs on him, the detective ordered Paul. As Paul was being led away, he tried to justify his actions until the end. My marriage to Natalie had failed. I had the right to find new love. However, hearing these words, James coldly declared, if there were problems in your marriage, you should have divorced. The moment you chose poisoning, you became a murderer. When James returned to the hospital room, he found his sister in tears. Natalie had understood everything from the conversation she could hear from the next room. 15 years, and I knew nothing. Natalie's voice was halting. It's not your fault, James embraced his sister. You lived with love and honesty. Only he is to blame. But why didn't I notice? About the affair, about the insurance money. Because you trusted him. That's your virtue, not a flaw. That night, lover Jessica was also arrested by police. It was revealed that she knew about Paul's plan and had actively cooperated. The two had conspired together to target Natalie's assets. The next morning's newspaper headlines read, "Attempted poisoning murder for insurance money." However, what mattered most to Natalie was that she was still alive, and that she had a brother with the courage to discover the truth. What happens now? Natalie asked her brother. First, you need to recover completely. Then you'll start a new life, James smiled gently. Your life is just beginning. After 3 months of intensive detoxification treatment, Natalie's body gradually regained its health. While recuperating at her brother James's house, she slowly recovered her hope for life along with her lost physical strength. The trial proceeded swiftly. Paul was charged with attempted murder and attempted insurance fraud, while his lover Jessica was charged with conspiracy. In court, Paul maintained until the end that he loved her, but the evidence was overwhelming. The pesticide purchase records, cell phone messages, and medical evidence proved it was premeditated crime. On the day of sentencing, Natalie sat in the gallery watching Paul. It was painful to see the man she had loved for 15 years standing in court in handcuffs. However, even more than that, her heart was filled with gratitude for being alive. The defendant Paul Wilson is sentenced to 15 years in prison, the judge's voice rang through the courtroom. Jessica received an 8-year sentence. The lover disappeared immediately after sentencing and never once visited Paul. It became clear that what she thought was love had actually been a calculating relationship motivated by money. The divorce proceedings were completed quickly, and Natalie received a substantial amount in compensation. However, what was most valuable to her was regaining her freedom. Through her brother's introduction, Natalie began a new job at the University of Rochester Library. The academic environment was stimulating, and interactions with researchers and students gave her new vitality. Particularly, the reading groups with literature professors reminded her of intellectual joys she had long forgotten. Around the time a year had passed, Natalie resumed mountain climbing, which she had always loved. Her physical strength, lost to the poison, had completely recovered, and she was actually living a healthier life than before. On weekends, she would visit the Adirondack Mountains, finding peace of mind in the great outdoors. One autumn day, at a special medical book exhibition held at the university library, Natalie met a man. David Harris was a cardiac surgeon, notable for his gentle smile and intelligent conversation. He collected medical books as a hobby and also participated in literature lectures held at the library. This book is a valuable resource about the development of medicine in the 19th century, David said, picking up an old medical text. Yes, it records in detail how physicians of that era dealt with diseases. Natalie naturally joined the conversation. From then on, the two began meeting regularly at the library, discussing medicine and literature. David had lost his beloved wife to cancer 10 years ago and had been raising his daughter alone since then. His kindness had no calculation behind it, and Natalie felt safe opening her heart to him. A year after they began dating, David learned all about Natalie's past. When he heard about the suffering she had experienced and how she had recovered, David quietly took her hand. "I'm so glad you survived. And now you're bringing light into my life." 2 years later, in spring, Natalie and David married. The ceremony was small, but Brother James and his family, David's 15-year-old daughter Emily, and library colleagues warmly celebrated the couple. Emily accepted Natalie as her stepmother, and the three became a true family. In the garden of their new home, Natalie thought while planting flowers. The period when she was being poisoned had certainly been the darkest time of her life. However, because of that experience, she could now understand how precious her current happiness was. When David came home from work, he always asked, "How was your day?" Emily would cheerfully tell them about her school day. Meal times were filled with laughter, and no one was trying to poison her. This was real love, a real family. At night, while reading in bed, Natalie would look at David sleeping beside her. His sleeping face held peace, and there was genuine, unpretentious love there. Love that sought no return, that truly wished for the other's happiness. Even without blood ties, relationships bound by true affection were what made a real family, Natalie understood deeply. Just as Brother James had saved her life, David and Emily had saved her heart. Life can be cruel at times, but love and hope always exist. Believing this, Natalie vowed to live each new day with care and gratitude.